Welcome to Sacred Earth Journey Roundtable. We are really getting into these series, and I am having so much fun. I am personally learning a tremendous amount of things by the guests that have come on. And my name is Anna Saladino, founder of Sacred Earth Journey, where we travel the world unfiltered, where strangers become tribe, and global peace begins at kitchen tables. So, just a quick little update through the podcast, through the shows that have been recorded so far. There is a friendly competition that has begun. And every guest that I have on, just through the natural conversation, many of them, there's something that they say that just really hits. And it's just a little phrase. Things like stay curious, get uncomfortable, trust is slow. Together, our differences make us extraordinary, and respect the flavors. They have now become a part of what is called the SEJ Collective, or Guest Legacy Voices. And we have now put these phrases with their names on the merchandise. The Stay Curious is part of the Cultural Curiosity collection. And there are several of them now. And a portion of those profits will go to the nonprofit of that guest that was on the show, or the nonprofit of their choice. And so that now brings the viewer into participation. And you now have an opportunity to help give towards just cultural stewardship and global peace initiatives by purchasing the merchandise. And so without further ado, I want to now welcome you to the roundtable. Another friend of mine, Marco Blankenburgh, he is with KnowledgeWorkx, and I'm going to let him do the introduction, just because the guests seem to do it better. They know more about the information that is pertinent. And so, Marco, go for it. Share a little bit about who you are personally, and then also just a little bit about KnowledgeWorkx.
Wonderful to be here, Anna. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm originally from the Netherlands, but I left the country 30 plus years ago. I lived in different parts of the world, but most of my life I've lived in the Middle East, different countries, and the last 20 plus years in the United Arab Emirates. Involved with KnowledgeWorkx, and we specialize in navigating intercultural complexity. We do that around the world. We always say Dubai is the best intercultural laboratory that exists, and we have learned a ton from that laboratory and have been able to engage with clients in over 70 countries. I don't just do this for work. I am interculturally married, have had the privilege of raising 4 third culture kids. So my whole life is intercultural. I can't escape it, and I love it.
I love it. That is awesome. Okay, so Netherlands, you're in UAE. You just mentioned an intercultural marriage and family. What brought you to UAE?
Well, a little bit of a long story, but in 4 sentences, maybe. I always was intrigued by different. When I was a kid, we had 2 English boys entering into our tiny little village school because their dad picked up a job at the lumberyard, and they didn't speak a word of Dutch. And I made it my mission to learn English on my own at 8 years of age because I wanted to be their friend. And that has always been with me. So I studied actually agricultural economics and agricultural farming to be taking that abroad, which then eventually happened into the Middle East, ended up not in agriculture, but in the NGO sector. And that's where I learned that about cultural difference, mainly through the mistakes I made. And that was eventually the trigger to say, wait a minute, I'm giving people all this advice, I'm having conversation. I speak Arabic, I studied Arabic, and had a chance to start advising people. And I thought I could actually be charging for this. So that's how it started. And one of my Emirati friends says, Marco is a Dutchman lost in the desert. I don't get lost in the desert anymore. but I love being in the Middle East.
That is awesome, and I love it. I have a similar love. 1 second. Scratch. Every time. Every time the lawn people, they show up when it's time to record. Okay, scratch. So I have a similar love with the Middle East or East Asia, really is more accurate. And I love أتكلم شوية عربي, just a
Oh,
little bit.
Toma.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still learning and studying. I've been studying it for several years now. I pick it up faster when I'm in country, as I'm sure you can attest to. So you love difference. I think this is also sort of relative to someone who says, I love change. I love both. I love change and
Mm-hmm.
I love difference. And I see so much beauty in them. Has there ever been a moment when you, speaking of difference with regard to relationship and culture and things like this, has there ever been a moment when you encountered a difference that made you uncomfortable or maybe a little unsettled?
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's several moments I can think of. Most of them are more traumatic moments, like I've worked in war zones multiple times in places like Yemen, Afghanistan. I'm going to be in Afghanistan in a few weeks from now again. We've worked in the Sudan during the previous president, and work in Libya. But there are positives and negatives. So I'll give you an example. I did a 4x4 trip with a good friend of mine in Yemen before the war started, and just wanted to explore because I had heard so much about the Hadramaut and the source of frankincense and myrrh, and we wanted to explore that part of the world. But then we quickly realized that you can't really travel there as a Kiwi and a Dutchman unless you have a local guard with you. So we learned about the Mahri tribes that are there who don't like speaking Arabic. And we finally found a friendly tribesman who said, okay, I'll travel with you, and if you pay me XYZ. So we got him in the car, we got to know him, and he parked his Kalashnikov between his knees, and he would travel with us through that whole area for a few days. And every now and then he would say, "Cough, cough," wait, wait. And he would hop out of the car, he would disappear over a sand dune, and he said, okay, mashi, mashi, push it to mom. We can continue, everything is okay. And that was the first time I was with a Kalashnikov carrying tribesman in the car for multiple days, and it was fun in the end, but it was definitely different. It was very different.
I can understand that. I can see how that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but
Yeah.
as you share that story, one of the things that I've discovered in my personal travels and experiences is how we show up in a new place, number one, and who we show up with.
Mm.
Okay. And the wisdom that you had to get someone local and say, hey, this is out of my scope. Can you please help? And if you had shown up otherwise, the outcome likely could have been drastically different. So
Oh, yeah.
talk a little bit about that, about how we show up and maybe with whom we show up when we are entering new culturally diverse spaces.
Yeah, one thing I've learned, there's a quote from Edward T. Hall that he was the founder of intercultural communication as a discipline. And he always says, culture is very good at hiding its intentions, especially from those who are from that culture. So it's not always true that having a local person with you is the best thing to do. In my case, with the tribal situation and getting clearance from chiefs to travel through their territory, you needed to really have a local. But I've learned from a good friend of mine who is a Manchester-born and trained at university there, Emirati, and we did radio together, and we were actually the perfect combination, so to speak, of what we call a local global person and a global local person. So who you show up with, I believe if you can get both of those and you show up with a local global person and a global local person, you have the highest chance of engaging successfully in that context.
I think there's so much wisdom in that. And what you said about the local language and just the nuance and all the complexities is so true. So with your, well, let's start a little personal first rather than going into KnowledgeWorkx. So if you're willing, share a little bit about them. Maybe how did you meet your wife? How did just share a little bit about that encounter, and then what do you as a family, have you encountered any kind of like negativity or pushback or, any uncomfortable situations because of being an intercultural family? And I ask this
Mm,
from personal knowledge because my oldest daughter is biracial and we have actually run into some things before. So it does exist.
yeah,
We like to say
yeah,
racism and things like this are dead, but there are still encounters. So go for it.
yeah, yeah. Well, we met in South Africa. My wife is South African, but European heritage from the 1600s. So her family was brought to South Africa because they were wine farmers, and they needed some wine farmers in the Cape, which is what her family still does. So they're soft fruit farmers and wine farmers. So we met at university in South Africa, where we were doing a event for international students. And the first time I saw her was with a music team. Yeah, and I didn't want to admit it, but it was love at first sight. But I was very slow to recognize that. And it took 2 years, I think, before I finally had a chance to speak to her. And she was almost losing her patience with me, but that didn't
Okay,
happen.
wait. So she clearly was interested in you, but you were not engaging.
I was I was not quick enough to acknowledge my feelings, which happened at a certain at an event. I was speaking in front of a group, and she was in the audience, and that's where our eyes locked, and I thought, "Whoa, wait a minute! This is much more than I thought it was." And that's where the penny finally dropped.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then you guys you become a couple, you begin having children. So yeah, were there any like have you experienced any negative encounters or responses from communities or people?
Well, on the outside, we're both white, but culturally, we're very different. So just to give you an idea, I knew that her family would appreciate it if I would formally ask her dad to marry his daughter. So I actually went to the farm. They come from a farm, and I stayed on the farm for a few days without her knowledge, and I formally asked her dad if I could marry his daughter. But when I arrived on the farm, which is out in the sticks, so to speak, it they were still using MC radio to communicate between farms. It didn't take 10 minutes before the first farmer showed up with a lame excuse, but it was all about, where's this Dutchman? What is he doing here? And it was like, okay, I'm not from here. I might on the outside look the same, but culturally I'm a very different animal. They called my kind cheeseheads. So the kaaskop from the Netherlands. And I quickly realized if I want to really be accepted in this community, there's three things I can do. I can learn to do a good South African barbecue. I can learn to speak Afrikaans, and I can learn to kick up a really good conversation about rugby around a beer. I failed on the last one, but I did learn to speak Afrikaans. So we speak Afrikaans in the house as well, and I'm pretty good at the barbecue. But I didn't pass all three of the tests. But it was a classic example of how incredibly different the culture is in that part of South Africa.
So her family is originally from Europe, though, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, from
And
the
how many
1600s.
Okay, and so 1600s is about the time when they were migrated to South Africa? Okay.
Hmm.
So they're really kind of a strong meshing of the two cultures.
Yeah, so local culture influence. So very strong honor code. So in some of our tools, we talk about, if I stereotype now, the Dutch culture is more about right and wrong and doing the right thing, avoid doing the wrong thing. But I learned very quickly that part of the South African culture is very honor driven. And I'm actually still learning that.
That's not very different from East Asian
Hmm.
cultures,
Hmm.
very, very honor driven. And you learn very quickly. So one of the things, in the West, if you're working with partners and teams and things like this, and there's something that you're needing, you just message and you just go straight into it. Hey, can you da
Hmm.
da da da? Well, my Afghan and Pakistani and Iranian partners, they
Doesn't
would
work.
bypass and not even answer the question, and they would say, "Good morning, Anna, da da da. How are you doing today? How is your family?" And all this long drawn out stuff. And it didn't take. I may not be the most intelligent person in the room, but I'm also not super slow. And I began to pick up on. I'm like, you know what? Things are just a little bit different here. So I changed the way I would interact with them initially,
Yeah.
and would start off by asking them and being more personal and relational, because there's that honor. It's you're honoring the person
Hmm.
front of you, you're honoring their name, their family name, and all the things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Super.
So, did you, before you met your wife, did you have any other like engagement or interaction with South Africans or anyone in her previous, the lineage down the line? And did you have like any kind of assumptions about South Africans that was just destroyed after engaging them with you?
Well, I realize that when you meet people who have for hundreds of years lived off the land, have created their own community, have gone through hardship together, um, uh, that is really changing people. So a lot of the South Africans I initially met in the Middle East, working with them, were typically more from the cities as opposed to the deep countryside. And that I immediately noticed the difference. Just a very closely knit community. And then me coming from the outside, sort of wanting to marry one of their daughters. That was a big thing. Uh, so it was even to the point when the bridal shower took place, and these were like 25, 30 ladies, rulers of the farm, so to speak, coming together. For some reason, I was allowed to be there, but the main reason was they wanted to see who this Dutchman was. So I was allowed to be there, where
So
all ladies,
I'm
and me, I was the only exception.
I'm thinking, because in many cultures, women kind of quietly sort of rule things. Not
Hmm.
from up front, but in the background. And I'm wondering, they were kind of going through their judgment process of you, were they not?
I can't officially, I don't have evidence, but I have a strong suspicion that that was happening, what was
They were
happening.
watching you closely.
Yeah, yeah,
I love it. This is so good. So you speak English, you speak Dutch,
yeah.
you speak
German, Afrikaans, and Arabic. Yeah.
okay. It Do you find that Each next language is easier to learn as you've learned more.
Is that true? It depends. Let me put it this way. It depends on the motivation. So I had already learned Arabic, and then I met the lady who became my wife, and then I was motivated by love to learn the language. And I find that that's a really good motivation. It works really well. The other thing I find that if a language has affinity, it's also easier to learn. So I did a lot of work in Afghanistan, for instance, and I would work with my Dari translator or my Pashtun translator. And I could follow the Dari after a while. And I would actually say, I don't think you've finished everything yet. Can
Yeah.
you add, I could pick up from my Arabic knowledge. So if there's affinity, then it's
Yeah.
easier. I got to a point where I could probably understand 30% of Dari. And yeah, so affinity makes a big difference. But my big goal is still to learn Mandarin, but I don't know if I'll ever get there.
Wow. I've heard that's a really hard one.
Yeah,
And it's just so different.
exactly. Very
Yeah,
different.
yeah. And you're not wrong about the affinity with Arabic and so many other languages. In fact, even Persian, Farsi
Hmm. Yeah.
is based off of the same alphabet. There's a few differences, but much of the language is very similar. Much of Hebrew is very similar to Arabic.
Hmm.
And again, the Dari, the Pashtun, and some of Urdu even, there's some
Yeah.
crossover. And so it does make it simpler for sure. So what brought you into all of these parts of the world? Because how long have you been with KnowledgeWorkx? What were you doing before that? What brought you all over the world?
So, like I said, I was working in NGO work before, and that's when the period when I met my wife to be, when we got married, and we lived in South Africa for a year. And then that's when the UAE was the first country to allow foreigners to own 100% of their own business. So we wanted to go back to the Middle East, and that's when KnowledgeWorkx was born. 2 suitcases, a bit of cash in hand, but way too little, and ambitious ideas. And that's how we arrived in the UAE in 2000, actually. So, yeah.
So UAE is not cheap.
No, it's not. It's like New York, Tokyo. Yeah.
How did you, so you arrived with a little cash and a couple of suitcases. I mean, were you scrambling to find work to get started?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I would not recommend it to anybody to do it this way.
Don't arrive in UAE without a job.
Yeah. Yeah, at least find a job, even if it's not the job you want. At least find a job first. Just settle for it for a year. Do your local networking, because that's super important.
Yeah.
And then eventually, hopefully, move into a job that's more in line with your passion, what gets you up in the morning. But
Yeah.
yeah, we arrived with lots of ambitions. It took a while to turn the company into a profit-making business, and of course, we have had 5 crises by now in that period. So the ups and downs, but we're still here, and we still love what we're doing, and we've been able to go global since that time.
So talk a little bit then about, you're talking about KnowledgeWorkx now, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell the viewers, just briefly, like, how, what's a simple way? What does KnowledgeWorkx do? What's the goal?
So our focus is really helping people thrive and organizations thrive in interculturally complex situations. Now, our dilemma is when you mention intercultural, people think, oh, that must be between people who carry different passports. But when I think about our work in Europe, our work in the US, very often people discover that we might carry the same passport, but we're culturally so diverse
Yeah.
that we really need to become what we then call more interculturally agile. And that's what our tools do. So we develop cultural agility, and we do that at team level. We do that for leaders. We do that even for married couples. So we have a Thriving Intercultural Marriages program that is sort of on the NGO side of our business. And one of my colleagues, they've run 18 different cohorts through that program.
Wow.
So anytime when culture gets more complicated, that's where we get involved. And our clients are NGOs, academic institutions, corporates, government entities, sometimes faith-based organizations as well. Anybody who has intercultural complexity to deal with on a regular basis.
Which, by the way, is pretty much everyone now that we are
nowadays. Yes, exactly.
in such a globalized world. There is there's intercultural interaction occurs almost every day.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, in looking at the website and all the things, you talk a great deal about human systems and organizational behavior. What happens to people and teams and even societies when curiosity disappears?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one. So one of the things that we say is that instead of saying, oh, you're from Germany and your colleague is from Brazil, and here is your tips and tricks, do's and don'ts for the Brazilian, and here is your tips and tricks for the German. Instead of doing that, what we developed 25 years ago is a different approach. So what we're saying, in the same way as you are psychologically a unique human being, you are also culturally a unique human being. And yes, you have probably generalized statements you could make about your, in my case, my Dutch passport, or the passport you carry, but every human being on this planet has been on their own cultural journey. So we say every human being is a uniquely wired cultural human being. And when you think about curiosity, it shifts how I'm showing up as a curious human being. Because you told me at the beginning you have an American passport, but you have extensively traveled and have lived in different parts of the world. So your passport is it's a small slice of who you are as a cultural human being. So we try to rekindle curiosity by resetting people's mind and saying, no, I'm not talking to an American. I'm talking to a uniquely wired cultural human being. And that means I have to ask more questions. I have to be curious. I have to find out your story. I have to create room for your story. And it creates a whole different connection. So if a leader starts to practice that, so we call it having a cultural learner's mindset as opposed to a cultural critic's mindset. And sometimes a cultural critic mindset it's not to do harm or intentionally, being critical. It's like, oh, Marco told me he's Dutch. Okay, then I know enough. I'm done, So a cultural learner mindset who really believes that everybody is on a unique cultural journey starts to ask more questions, starts to slow it down, starts to make time to connect at a more meaningful level. And I find at teams, that is typically a great starting point, because then you can really show up as human beings. People are seen, people are heard, there's room for their story, and it starts to immediately strengthen the relational fabric on a team.
We are seeing, I believe, especially in the West, but I think it's happening on a global scale, such fragmented societies and such polarization, and much of the polarization is being promulgated by governments, and by
Mhm.
political systems and media outlets and things like this. What happens in your wisdom and expertise when we stop being curious and when we stop seeing the other person as human, whether it's business, whether it's just in general relationships, teams, you know, whatever. What happens when we begin to take on that mindset that, the whole
Mhm.
dehumanization and the not being curious, not seeing the other person as a human individual, rather seeing them as a categorical assumption. Just talk about that.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, there's a huge dilemma, and that has to do with social media, governments, agendas, big agendas. Where when I don't know if you're familiar with Shimamanda Adichie did a famous TED talk about the single story, and we still use that concept. So yes, polarization happens, but the worst thing about polarization is that it always comes with a bunch of single stories. Those people are like this, and that could be political, it could be religious, it could be sexual orientation, it could be anything. It's always those people are, and it's full stop or exclamation mark. And social media, unfortunately, through the algorithms, reinforces it. So you create these echo chambers around those people are like this. And that's what feeds people's minds. So one of the things, for instance, we've done with our kids is that by and large, I think they follow that rule. They're older now, that social media is never a source for news, for instance. News is picked up from neutral news agencies, or more or less neutral. So when it comes to polarization, the unfortunate reality is that the younger generation fed on social media echo chambers, two things were lost. One is they don't have the skills anymore to dialogue and hold relationships across difference. But the other thing that they've been taught is that you don't associate, you don't hang out with people who don't think like you. And that is actually more worrying than the walls that have been built, because we don't even have skills anymore to scale those walls and be in relationship across difference. So, for instance, that's why we created the intercultural question game. So we have 31 categories with over 1,000 questions that people in a game format can play, and it's always the same thing. When people play that game, they have fun across difference. They again learn what questions they can ask, and they find that people's stories are just beautiful, intriguing, heartwarming. And when people start to learn to reach across difference again, then they find, I would say, 99 out of 100, they find beauty in it.
Yeah, that's it. And we also find that we have so much more in common than we don't. Um,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Maybe it just looks a little different, but there's still so many more commonalities than there are differences. How can is this game, the intercultural game, is this available to just anyone or?
Yeah, we have a website. It's either book format or in game format. So if you are either a facilitator or you work with students, or we have one of our facilitators. She has a group of people who originate from the same country, and they come together every month to do a game night.
Oh.
And they're all from the same country, migrated to another country, and she brought this intercultural question game. And she texted me. She said, "Marco, this is the only game we played the whole night." Just telling stories and learning about each other's lives and the journeys we've been on. So yeah, it's the website is interculturalquestions.com.
Okay.
And people can get it from there. Yeah, but it's a
And
fun game. Yeah.
we will put the link in the description of the YouTube publication as well. You're reminding me of, I remember when I was staying in Iraq, and one of my best friends, she's half my age, but we just became such good friends. And we spent a lot of time together while I was there. We still communicate now. But I just remember, I was asking her about the whole bidet situation because here in the West, we really don't use them very much. And my first encounter was in Oman. And it's a funny story. You can read about the story in my book, Daughter of Many Tribes. It's quite comical. And but I just remember asking her, like, Nor, can you help me? Like, give me some tips on, how to have better experiences with these bidet systems and the squatter potties. And so these are the things that we're talking about, is like the common thing is that we all have to go to the bathroom. The not
Yeah,
so common thing is how that's done.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but we were open enough to be able to have those conversations. And she was asking, well, why don't you guys use them in the West? And so, to her point, I'm really not sure, because it does seem like a better deal, but
Yeah, my son now is at the point where he travels with his little hose and with his little so he has a contraption because he says, I don't understand toilet paper.
yeah, yeah,
Because he grew up in with bidets and
that's so,
Hanafias.
I didn't know they had those. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Crazy. So you've worked with leaders across different industries and cultures. Um, what patterns have you noticed about leaders who create trust versus leaders who create fear?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really great question because trust is a crucial ingredient that we often start with. The dilemma is trust is very often either too fluffy and intangible, and or the how to is dictated by things that have been written about it in English, which then also is reflective of Western culture in terms of trust.
Mm.
What we found is that trust is behavior based, so or merit based. So in the first question we always ask, and this is fun when you have an intercultural group, is trust given or is it earned? And we put a scale up and we ask people to put their mark on the scale. Is it a little bit this, a little bit that, or is it fully earned? Or no, I just deposit 100%. I meet Anna for the first time, I deposit. And it's fascinating with an intercultural group. You might have the full scale marked in by a group. So even just the activation of trust is very different. So how do you start depositing? So no matter if somebody says, nope, it's fully earned for me, I don't know you, I'm going to start working with you, and then maybe I'll start depositing. And even if that's the case, then we find there are 4 conversations a team needs to have about trust, understanding how does the trust bank account work? How do you deposit? How do you withdraw? What do I need to do for you to withdraw from it? So the first, it's no particular order, but one of the things is, how do I show that I'm reliable? What does that look like? How do I show respect? What does openness look like between us? Am I open to receiving feedback? Am I open to be told to do it in a different way? In what context do I receive that? Can I receive that in public? Does it have to be in private? Can that go up the hierarchy, or can it only go down the hierarchy? So reliability, honesty, respect, openness, and then honesty. So what does honesty? What is it? And that's actually a very difficult conversation. It might sound simple, but when you ask me a quote unquote honest question, but it is a question that potentially puts the relationship at risk.
Wow, yeah.
What's more important for me then, to give you that honest answer that's sitting here in my head, or am I giving you an answer that will protect our relationship? Which means I might filter some of the stuff up here, and what comes out of my mouth is more honoring to the relationship than grammatically or linguistically giving the exact answer that you might be looking for. So those 4 words is fascinating, because once you start deep diving into it, you find that people think very, very different about those words. Yeah.
Just list those one more time for the viewers.
So there is reliability, respect, and then openness and honesty. So openness is really about the the engagement with each other, and honesty starts in my head, but then goes into communication and the words that flow between us.
I feel like in my personal experiences, and travels that in the West, we seem to be much more black and white about these topics and about many things. It's either this or it's that, and there can never be simultaneous truths. Um,
Mm,
and then especially as you were speaking on honesty, and I actually just watched a reel. I think it was, I don't even want to say who it was. It doesn't matter. But there was a question asked at an event about honesty, and the person that was being asked that was on the platform was like, and it's an American person who was recently killed, and they were like, absolutely 100%, always be honest no matter what. And the person who was
mm,
challenging and asking, well, but what if it harms the person or it hurts, and it was just an interesting conversation. It just makes me think about now what you're saying, and when you were speaking about honesty and sometimes things go through a filter, it seems like oftentimes in the West, it's just things are just so black and white, and it's not
mm,
like we don't even stop to consider that maybe there is a different way, and things are very much more complex in East Asia and in that entire region. And again, it's tied to the honor culture.
hmm.
Back
Yeah.
to, I may not say A, B, and C because it could disrupt the
Yeah.
honoring relationship and and family. I mean, so many things come into it.
Mm. Yeah, but there's another element there, and this is something I've been trying to communicate to people wherever I can, and that is to do with when it comes to things like honesty and things like speaking and having the freedom to speak.
Mm,
Um, Even Nelson Mandela already, when he came out of jail in the early 90s, he was asked about freedom. And he said, freedom without responsibility and accountability is not freedom at all.
mm,
But he wasn't talking about individual accountability. He was talking about that, but he was equally talking about opposites, talking about community accountability.
yeah,
So the idea that freedom to speak or to say your to voice your opinion is only individual accountability governed,
mm,
that is a huge issue. And that's what I see in the West, is
yeah,
that the freedom to speak or the freedom to be, well, honestly, here's my answer. Well, at the same time, I need to think about, is that from a group, from a family, from a team, from an organizational, from a neighborhood, or
mm,
is that a wise thing to say? And I'm afraid that community accountability side of how we speak with one another has been lost.
mm,
And so, yes, honor or do saying the right thing or saying the honorable thing, that's one thing. But that idea of holding both community accountability and individual accountability at the same time in the way we engage with one another, that is something that has been lost in many Western contexts. And
yeah,
it's detrimental. It really kills this whole idea of freedom of speech, because it was always meant to be healthy for the community, healthy for the individual, and you hold those two in tension.
wow. It's it, there's also this thing about preference that's tied to freedom of speech, and we're seeing this in the West also, how we're very boisterous and loud to speak out that, again, that black and white kind of rigidity, this is how it should be. And really, ultimately, it comes down to this is someone's preference. And
Hmm.
again, in my experiences, being immersed in other cultures, I very quickly began to learn, speaking of the bathroom situation, I show up, well, here's what I'm used to, but I show up in another place, this is how they do it. Well, I prefer it this way, right? But this is how they do it. It's not
Mhm.
wrong, it's just different.
Yeah.
And this is not just to those tangible things, it's also to a touchy subject, okay? Do you remember, and I don't even remember how all this went down, with the bowing to the flag, or the
Mhm.
standing and pledging to the flag during the national anthem and the things like this. In this country, we have the freedom to stand or not to stand, to put our hand on our chest or not to put our hand on our chest. But we saw a lot of controversy and a lot of rhetoric and things that you need to do this because this is it. Well, that's that person's preference, but it turned into
Mhm.
this big thing.
Yeah.
And like I like what you're saying about the communal responsibility.
Mhm.
And I see
Yeah.
this a lot in other countries, especially in the East. Like one of the things that I noticed that is beautiful is the loud mufflers in the vehicles and the loud radios and things like that. You really won't see a lot of that in many other countries. One, because maybe it's not allowed. Two, there's such a mindset in individuals because it's taught from a communal perspective that what
Mm.
I do and say affects the people around me. How I
Yeah.
behave affects the people around me. Other people may not want to hear the music I want to hear. And so for me
Mhm.
to just selfishly impose my preferential musical taste on everyone else is very rude and disrespectful.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
So maybe this is what you're talking about, maybe not.
No, and it shows up in so many ways. It shows up in choices we make. It shows up in finding a spouse, for instance. So strong community accountability cultures. Guess what? Finding a spouse is not just you.
Yeah,
It's the whole family, or sometimes the whole village is involved in it. It shows up in education. I still remember we once were asked. So we don't just do the cultural side; we also use psychometric tools to shed light on the psychological side of human behavior, because culture is just one side, but the psychological side is equally important. So one day we were asked by the board of a school, an international school, to bring a teenage version of one of our psychometric tools. They say, yeah, this would be amazing. We have 300 graduates. They're going to go into the big world, to decide on their studies. And this sounds like a great gift that we can give to our students. And we lined it all up. And then the dean of the school called us and said, the project is not happening. And I said, okay, can you explain why? Yes, he said some of the parents who come from strong community accountability cultures have said, you're going to do what? You're going to educate my child to make their own choices when it comes to their education? Said, no, 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 no. My daughter is going to become a medical practitioner, or my son is going to become an engineer, and you're not going to meddle with that. So there was like a mini riot from amongst the parents. And they said, no psychometric assessment for our children, because the community accountability was more important than giving the children the freedom to individually make a choice about university, college, next steps in life. That was done in the community, within the family context.
yeah.
So yeah, it can be pretty significant in terms of life choices.
Wow. And to be able to, again, understand something like this, is it my preference? Not necessarily, I'm thinking of even things like with the whole marriage system, like again, a close friend of mine lives in an East Asian country, and it is very common that the family has a lot of input and say, and
Hmm.
sometimes even control on who the children will marry.
Yeah.
And in my mindset and my cultural mindset and upbringing and all the things, I see it one way and believe it to be one way. But then this is how they do it. And they do this for a lot of reasons. I mean, there's so many things that come into play. Tribal communities. I mean, the faith, so many different things come into play. And
Yeah,
again, we have
yeah.
to slow down and stay curious and actually step back and look at the bigger picture.
Mm.
This is how things operate here. Here's why there's such a long history of why these things happen this way. I think you might have something you want to share.
No, I'm just thinking about, you said something earlier on about the holding opposites, two opposites, two things that are true at the same time. We the term for it is polarity management. It's actually quite often talked about in academic circles. But this idea that community and accountability and individual accountability are two opposites, and very often you need to hold both of them if you want to interculturally engage successfully. You just mentioned another one. So we call this the destiny dimension. So either destiny is directed. So the example you gave about marriage, how much of marriage is my choice versus arranged for me? If it's more arranged for me, it's directed destiny. If it's a directive destiny, then it's I just make up my own mind, and it might even be okay to go against the wishes of my family as long as it's my choice. So that's another one of those opposites that if you move around between cultures long enough, you find that people find comfort, safety, reliability, trust in being directed, being told where things are arranged for you.
Mm.
And I've seen this play out in companies where we had a classic example of one of our clients who the headquarters is more directive destiny. I make my choices. I make my voice heard. I plot my plan. And then they said, well, that's how managers need to start behaving if they want to be developed. So if you want to be developed, you speak up. You go to your boss and you tell your boss, I've been doing some thinking. I want this training. I want this training. Here's my development path. Can you sign off on it? And it failed. The program failed because a lot of the world is more directed destiny, where it
Wow.
would be offensive to go to my boss and say, boss, I've been doing some thinking. I want XYZ. No, in a directed destiny context, you trust your boss has more experience. Your boss has done this much longer. And
Mm.
you say, you say something like, you haven't seen me at work. We've worked together and you've been my leader for a long time. I've been thinking about the future. And I would love to get your recommendation, your wisdom and counsel as to what next steps I might need to take. And people find security in that. And it works. 2/3 of the world population is much more directed destiny. And only a third of the world population is directive destiny.
Wow.
So yeah, holding those in hand loosely and just finding your way through and being okay that being directed from above, if it's my boss or the community leader or the religious leader, sometimes that's the only way forward.
Yeah. Wow. That's I we will include, by the way, because you're sharing a lot of great wisdom, we will include the KnowledgeWorkx website link as well, in the description of the YouTube publication. But because I saw that there are many tools that are available on the website and things like this that look very helpful. Whether it's for personal development or for teams and businesses, definitely check out the website that we post on there. What's one conversation in your life that fundamentally changed the way you see humanity?
Wow, that's a big question. Uh, fundamentally
This is
change
how
the
we're
way.
ending it, so you got to think about
Wow.
you like go strong.
Um, hmm. I think, yeah, the one thing that comes to mind is one of my earliest mentors. Um, he was Malaysian heritage, and he was gracious enough to become our mentor at the beginning of KnowledgeWorkx.
Mm.
very successful businessman, very humble, and I I once had a conversation with him, and that was at those early days when we realized that those two suitcases and that purse with money was insufficient, and um, I was complaining to him and saying, "Yeah, I can't wait to be out of this tunnel." Sort of the idea that at the end of the tunnel there's going to be light. And he looked at me and he said, "Marco, you're going to miss so much if you only want to wait for the light at the end of the tunnel. You need to learn to find the light in the tunnel." And that always stuck with me. And we've gone through many, many difficult circumstances, especially in terms of the business, but also working in high stakes environments, and just learning to find light in any circumstance, not wait for this difficult season or moment to pass and see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think that has always been helping me get perspective, but also look for it intentionally in those difficult moments. And that's where living on the edge of yourself is one of the best places to be, because that's where you grow faster than anywhere else.
Yeah.
But finding that light in those difficult moments is very hope giving, but it's also very enriching.
And you have to be intentional about it. His wisdom was very profoundly accurate. So, do you have any last thoughts you want to share quickly?
Well, one of the previous guests already stole the "stay curious" phrase. Uh, I would just say it in a different way. If you're committed to having a cultural learner's mindset, life just becomes so much richer.
Mm,
And yes, it requires curiosity, but it also requires humility.
yeah.
So a cultural learner's mindset means I don't know everything, even silly things like how to use the bathroom. um, there's so many things we don't know, and if you approach it with a cultural learner mindset, life just becomes so much more fun.
Yeah, I love that. Yours may be, I don't know everything. I mean, it's common, but come on. And then I also loved how you were saying, to how did you say it? Stay on the edge of yourself. I'm gonna have to go
Yeah,
back and listen.
yeah. So we just wrote an article on authenticity, and your authenticity has to be challenged for it to grow,
Mm,
and it only grows on the edge of yourself.
there you
And
go.
that's putting yourself into situations where you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, you don't know how things work. And actually, the oxymoron is that's where your authentic self actually starts to mature and come alive.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Authenticity grows on the edge of yourself. That's cool. All right, Marco, it has been such a pleasure. Hopefully, there will be some more collaboration down the road, and we look forward to seeing what KnowledgeWorkx continues to do with regard to cultural stewardship. And if you want to learn more about KnowledgeWorkx or Marco Blankenship, again, the links will be put in the description, and also the game, the intercultural game. I want to check that one out. And again, this is Sacred Earth Journey, where we travel the world unfiltered, where strangers become tribe, and global peace begins at kitchen tables.